Right, good morning everybody. Welcome to another webinar. Today we've got Pete Sanders from Identifi Global talking to us about recruitment and a number of changes and things. And this will be a bit of a shared presentation, I understand, so Pete will be the lead, but his colleagues are here as well. And as per usual, we'll do questions at the end of Pete's presentation. As usual, we're recording this. We'll send you all the slides afterwards as well, and also we'll provide you with Pete's details if you want to follow up afterwards. As always, this is part of a series. We've got our next 5 webinars up on the website now for you to check out. Covers things like corporate social responsibility, but also cybersecurity and business continuity planning and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up. Make sure that you're up to date and sign up to those as well. So yes, we'll let Pete do his presentation. We'll then do a Q&A session as per normal. So obviously either give us a wave in real life or raise a virtual hand, and we'll switch over to you. But that's really about it. So I'll hand over to Pete. Do you want to take it over from here?
Perfect. Thank you very much. So again, just to confirm, so it's myself on the call and my business partner Gary Fay. We're the founders and owners of Identifi Global. We'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. And Adam Wyman, who is the employment partner at Travers, a legal business in London, and he'll be talking to you about the employment law changes. A little bit about us at Identifi. We're market leaders in personalised career management and talent acquisition. We're a truly candidate-led talent business, which is guaranteed by our candidate charter. Our recruitment consultants are paid commission based on candidate experience. So that just means that your candidates, the candidates that we recruit for you, are guaranteed to get an excellent service because our consultants' commission hangs on it. Our core clients are the SME market, so they're sort of small to medium enterprises who need to compete to attract, retain, and develop top talent. We're a confederation of specialist talent business that provide recruitment consultancy to some of the world's most respected brands. Our 3 companies are Identifi Global, so they focus on cybersecurity, business change and transformation, IT, and executive search. Identifi Office Professionals that focus on HR, finance, accounting, sales, marketing, business administration, so core business functions. And Identifi Body Repair, who are market leaders in automotive body repair specialists. We provide permanent contract, fixed term and interim placements. And essentially we help our clients save time, money and resources in the recruitment process. And our clients are globally as well as local. And here's just a bunch of our clients that we work with in the regional areas. We're going to cover today, as we've mentioned, employment law changes and post-COVID-19 considerations. We're also going to just briefly talk to you about how to navigate the world of virtual recruitment. It's going to be the new norm, certainly for the foreseeable future. And we want to try and help you make the most of that and how to recruit people virtually as best you can. So Gary's going to cover off navigating the world of virtual recruitment. Gaz, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Peter, your slides are not up, so I don't know whether.
Oh, they're not?
No, we're just all enjoying you at the moment.
Oh, there you go. There's the first. Only 1 second. Here we go.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Right. Okay, there we go.
Morning, everybody. So I won't spend too long on this. I'm sure Adam's information a little bit further down the line is going to be quite useful to everybody. But I think challenging and interesting times is probably a bit of an understatement at the moment. But we as a recruitment firm and what we regard as a very, very good recruitment firm are now thinking about our exit out of the lockdown. But probably more importantly, what we're exiting into. there was a phrase that was thrown away around for several years, some years back, which was a war for talent, which was an interesting phrase at the time. But I think if I said to you, the new world of work is probably going to be the new kind of recruitment phrase that we're all going to start listening to. I think the new world of work is clearly going to be different than it was somewhat, 2 months ago, let's say. We are now considering what the new world of work actually looks like and how we might engage with you as businesses, and you as businesses might actually start thinking about hiring people. I suspect it's going to be a little bit different. We're already starting to strategize about what different looks like and actually how we can probably plug into that style of recruiting. I think remote recruiting is probably going to be familiar territory for everybody in the next few months and probably for the remainder of this year. We're still seeing a little bit of activity and kind of, I suppose, what you call green shoots of opportunity. There's particular sectors in terms of retail, pharmacy, logistics, customer service. They all seem to be trading at the moment, and actually there seems to be a requirement for people, which is good from our perspective, but I think from your perspective it's also good. I suspect you've all got clients and services that you're providing to different people in different areas and sectors. It just may well be that we all have to consider what sectors we're going to provide our services into. In terms of hotspots, it's been quite interesting. We as a business have an IT business, but we've got a real strong position in the market in terms of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, pretty much in the online world, has become extremely busy to us and for us. That remains to be really busy at the moment. But Adam will testify later that HR teams, legislation, marketing, there's a whole host of new skills that are probably going to come to the fore in the next 6 to 12 months that I think everybody needs to start thinking about and considering. I'll quickly touch upon a few things in terms of what remote recruitment actually looks like in a couple of moments, but it's probably worth considering as you think about your current staff. And I do appreciate that people will have furlough issues, and I appreciate that in really bad circumstances and situations, it may well be that you're going to lose people. We're also having to consider all of those things and juggle lots of balls at the same time. But if you consider that a permanent piece of recruitment probably has an 8 to 12 week period of turnaround, if you're thinking about people that you need in your business, then you've almost got to think 12 weeks behind the problem. That's something that we're always telling clients, that an immediate problem today doesn't necessarily give you a solution tomorrow. So you've almost got to strategize about actually the types of people that you might need in this current situation, be it contract staff, interim staff, fixed term contracts, or indeed permanent staff. What is interesting is actually a set of tools that were starting to show themselves in the last year, but I think these tools now very much come to the fore. Virtual recruitment, it's a funny word, or funny set of words, but actually there is such a thing as virtual recruitment, and actually it does look like something. And firms like ourselves have a set of tools that actually fit that particular product and that particular problem quite well. Areas that I think become more prevalent, and actually I suspect we've all seen it in the last few weeks and months, is video. Video is a strange beast. I don't know if anyone's tried to kind of log on to Skype. I suggest you don't. It's awful. However, Skype may be your video choice or video tool of choice. We're on Zoom at the moment, which is great, but it's had its bad press in recent weeks in terms of security. Pim's videoing this particular and recording, in fact, this particular presentation. But if we now consider, if you were to actually run interviews over video, is the video platforms you've got on your business fit for purpose for interviews and not WebExes? Are you actually recording the video? Can you actually refer back to the video? And there's some really good tools in the market. We have a particular tool ourselves as a business that are fit for purpose for exactly that, for video recruitment and video interviews and the like. And actually that's very different than a Zoom platform, which to some degree is a WebEx tool and not necessarily a tool fit for purpose for recruitment. So choose your platform properly. There's some really good deals out there. They're not particularly expensive. If you consider sometimes the cost in getting people to your office or you going to meet people, the time it takes to actually take time out of your diary every day, actually video recruitment's a pretty cool thing. And we would suggest definitely investigating the best tool that you might use. We've got some great advice in terms of actually what good recruitment videos look like. And as I say, we've got a great tool ourselves that we use in our business. But do investigate that, because I think it will give you the flexibility that you might need in the next 6 months. Zoom is fine, Microsoft Teams is fine. I just think that they're WebEx tools and not necessarily video tools for recruitment. The other thing is, and I'm sure you're all painfully aware of this, is actually hiring somebody with the right experience and skill is clearly at the top of everybody's agenda. But once you've actually got skill and ability and experience, I suppose, in place, more importantly, and actually the thing that makes people really successful in your organizations is cultural fit. Cultural fit to us is probably the most relevant bit of recruitment that we do. We, as recruiters, I suggest that we should be able to find skills and experience, but measuring cultural fit is actually really, really important. We personally use a set of talent management tools, and in particular, psychometrics. Psychometrics are fantastic for managing preferred behaviors. We can actually look at your culture as a business and actually match the right people against that culture. Typically, if you get culture right, actually the person is percentagely, a high percentage that is, much more successful in your organization. More importantly, are highly likely to stay in your organization. So you're actually using some form of online psychometric tool or talent management tool are really fabulous tools to actually include now, particularly in this world of recruitment where it's virtual and you're not necessarily sitting with the person face to face. Cognitive assessment tools and cognitive ability tools are also in high demand at the moment. And again, Identifi have got a suite of these tools that we actually use quite often, and we're using quite often pre the current crisis. But I suspect they'll come into play much more strongly in the coming months, and probably years. I think actually assessments and tooling and talent management tooling is now actually really affordable. We would encourage all organisations to use them, because actually they tell you a lot more about the cultural fit of a person than simply a CV or actually even an hour's interview would potentially do for you. The other thing that, particularly on video and particularly from distance, actually competency-based interviewing, actually interviewing people in the right way rather than actually having a kind of an interview that probably allows you to have a comfortable and nice conversation, but doesn't actually extract the right information. We can help you with actually developing competency-based interviews, actually, again, specific to the job and specific to you as an organization. And actually true competency-based interviews are absolutely fantastic, and particularly from recruitment and particularly from distance. Actually getting the best out of that hour on a video call and actually extracting the right information from that video call is actually critical. It also cuts down the amount of times that you might have to meet the particular person to actually make your decision. So they're tools that actually, from a talent management perspective, that we would highly recommend that you do, but I think they're tools that you're going to need in your business in the next few months and years, I suspect. Beyond that, actually, we get to background screening. Background screening is an interesting one, and I would ask the question, and don't necessarily have to answer, but ask yourself the same question. Do you reference check? I suspect you do, but I suspect you don't take a great deal of worth in actually what the reference tells you. Most people will give a positive reference, whether or not they like the person or the person was good, bad, or indifferent in their last organisation. I'm sure you've all been asked to actually give people references. We're very British in referencing, in the sense that we kind of inclined not to say anything bad, so we probably kind of defer from saying anything, or if anything else, we simply say, yeah, great person, really, really good. So background checking is actually really important. And I'm sure Adam's going to touch upon legislation in a couple of moments, but actually right to work in the UK is going to change in the coming months with Brexit. Actually true background checking in terms of where they worked, what they did, their right to work, their particular situation personally. It could be a security check, it could be a financial check, but we'd encourage you to use proper background checking tools, and particularly if you're actually hiring people from distance. background checking actually becomes more front and center and actually more important, because you might actually be forced to make a decision on a video call, and actually having a set of tools to do a background check actually becomes extremely important, I would suggest, particularly as we're all being careful of the pounds that we spend. Pete, go on to the next one. What was done that one? And again, remote onboarding. So remote onboarding is interesting in as much as people actually like to be onboarded differently. It's very interesting that some people like to come in and actually be looked after and almost kind of hand around the shoulder and actually encouraged to kind of do a particular style of work. It could be training, it could be actually you as an organization. So there's different styles that people will adapt to and actually prefer. It's suggested that if you don't get your onboarding right in the first 3 months of a person's 3 months with you, the likelihood is that they will leave within the first 12 months. So interestingly, that onboarding period, and particularly again from distance, becomes absolutely vital. And we can actually use several toolings and pieces of talent management to give you a sense as to the right way to onboard somebody. But it is things and areas that you should now start to investigate and consider, particularly if you're going to be hiring new people. And you, like us, are going to be very, very careful of the pounds that you spend. Hiring the right people becomes incredibly important in times like these. We're clearly going to go into a recession. And I would suggest that us as a business have no interest in actually coming back to replace that person for you. So we will do as much as is possible. And that's not just us. I would kind of encourage you to really push your recruitment partners to ensure that the people that they're actually placing with you are actually going to stay with you and be successful. And there are tools that you can do to actually take away the risk of that piece of recruitment. And if that recruitment firm can't give you those kind of guarantees, I would suggest that you look around the market to find recruitment partners that actually want their people to stay with you for forever, and not necessarily make a second fee off you because someone left after 6 months. We firmly believe at Identifi that actually if you hire the right person, invariably they stay, invariably they're incredibly successful, but probably more importantly, they're probably very, very happy. And with happiness comes loyalty, and then with loyalty becomes very productive people. So actually recruitment is incredibly important, but actually using some tools in what will be a strange new world as we learn how to adapt to it in the next 6 months becomes a new way of working. And I do appreciate that some people would not be even thinking about recruitment at all, and it wouldn't surprise me. However, if you do want to have a chat about other things rather than recruitment, and sometimes it may be around retention, we're perfectly happy to have a chat with you. At the same time, if you're going to lose people, please reach out to companies like Identifi, because we will happily take and engage with your staff. I'm sure that nobody wants to lose anybody, but if you want to actually do something for them, put them in touch with companies like Identifi. And as a candidate-centric business, we will do as much as is physically possible as an organisation to actually advise that candidate correctly and actually take them back out to market. So it's not just about actually making recruitment placements for us as a business. It's about actually providing a candidate service. And sometimes it's a kind of lost art in recruitment that we can actually do outplacement as well as we can do in-placement. So they're just a few things that you might want to consider. By all means, have a chat with us, and we can kind of build out some of those areas that I've mentioned. Pete, is that okay? Is that
great? Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Just moving on is as you can see, it's a complicated market, and there's lots to consider, but there's lots that you can do yourselves that that can help you recruit really great people right now. Sadly, due to the current climate, we're seeing a huge spike in highly qualified candidates joining the market. The plus side to this is that those companies that are recruiting, who are looking to hire, can have the pick of the bunch, which is not something we would normally have said. As Gary sort of mentioned, sort of momentarily, we can say that the war for talent is momentarily paused, and that's something that we probably haven't said for sort of a good sort of 5 or 6 years, 5, 6, 7 years, and but just because there's quantity doesn't necessarily mean there's quality. But these things you need to look out for, because there's people coming to market that will take a job, and the assessment and the background screening and all of the qualification that needs to go into place. You need to make sure that you're hiring the right person for the right reason, not just because they're available. One of the things you could do now is that even in an economic slowdown, it's important to stay in front of your clients. We do understand that, but it's also important to stay in front of your prospective hires. Increased visibility builds trust and confidence for you that your company is solid. Ways to be visible include things: increased media coverage, increased online presence, and obviously letting people know about any new products or services that you may offer. You can revitalize your company website. Your website is one of the most popular ways to attract talent. In fact, according to a survey by our marketing team, 90% of job seekers visit a company website before making a decision about where they want to work. So any dull or outdated websites can turn prospective employees away, almost immediately. As you can see, the tone of your web attracts, can attract or repel candidates. If you've got an job advert out there and it's saying that we're cool, we're funky, we're dynamic, we're fast-paced, and your website suggests that you're anything but that, then even if you think it looks good, it could be read in a completely different way. So getting the tone and the copy of your website is really important. So you're essentially asking your website to do the work of a recruiter, which is the sales pitch, which is what recruiters are good at. So it's important that you get that blend right between selling the dream and giving a sense of realism. Video, I mean, it's one of the bones of contention, but utilizing video is a really easy way to demonstrate passion, excitement, and why candidates should get involved in your business, whether it's some sort of infomercial of a product or service, or whether it's the MD or CEO or someone in your company saying how great it is to work there. People really like it, and it's people interact with video much more than a 10-page part of your website with someone saying how good it is. Easier said than done, and Gary touched on it around psychometrics. Is we're in a different time now. Today is a new day in terms of recruiting people. So it's really important that you start to think about the new people that you can bring into your business. Innovators and game changers, you don't want a whole business full of these people, but there are benefits and disadvantages to that. But hiring people that think differently in a time where we need to be different helps drive your business forward. So, and being an innovator and game changer, these are things that absolutely can be assessed in an interview process. It's great to have people who think the same way that you've always thought, but as you say, if you do the same thing, you get the same results. So as we transition out of this and whatever the new world of work and economy looks like, we need people to think differently and bring new ideas. Strengthen your offer. So of course, with many candidates that you want will still be in work. Not everybody is going to be made redundant or let go or whatever. So it's important that you strengthen your offer, and you need to bear in mind that with the shaky economy comes nervousness, and better the devil you know than the devil you don't when moving jobs. So it's really important that you strengthen your offer, and the rhetoric around when you onboard these people is about letting them know that their job is safe and how you're going to look after them. More so than ever. There is a sense of protection in employment law, but right now in an economic downturn, there's a lot of uncertainty. So sometimes people aren't going to move. So just have that in your mindset when you're making an offer to someone who's new. Again, Gary touched on the onboarding. Internal processes need to change. It's as simple as that. Whether it's a case of you're going to hire someone on a remote basis for a period of time until things return to normal, or whether or not you are going to need to have some element of home working, forever. So onboarding someone in a remote way requires a different consideration, disaster recovery, getting equipment out to them. So these are the things that you just need to consider when onboarding someone on a remote basis. Something that we wouldn't normally recommend is advertising right now. Advertising in the recruitment space sort of died a long time ago. And if you've put an advert out via an Indeed or some other traditional job board, they just don't work, or the quality of the candidates you get is just, is a waste of time. Now is a good time to advertise, because there's lots of people at home with time on their hands, working remotely. They'll be considering, what happens to them. They're either going to be looking for a job because they're available immediately, or there is uncertainty in their organisation. And we spoke to several clients where they're still on furlough, but the company said, basically we are going to have to make redundancies. So there's a lot of jobs at risk. So there's a lot of people who are proactively searching for work. 3 months ago, even, the job market was 90% passive. It's swung now to 60, 70% active. So and that's just uncertainty. So now is a good time to advertise your jobs, but ensuring that the things I've just mentioned previous to that are sort of on point as well. Because if you put out a nice, great, fancy advert and they land on your website and looks like they've gone back in time, then it's gonna jar your message a little bit. And of course, using a reputable search firm, obviously we put ourselves into that mix, but there are lots of great recruiters out there, but there are also lots of terrible ones, and you really need to ensure that if you are onboarding a new recruiter, that you have a selection process in place, and you don't race to the bottom in terms of just trying to find the cheapest deal, because essentially you get what you pay for. So at the end of this, we've got some really good offers for people on this call at the end of this webinar, which I'll show you there. But for now, we're going to pass over to Adam, and please feel free to ask questions in the chat. Put your hand up or virtual hand, and hopefully we'll try and cover them off. If not, we'll have a Q&A session at the end as well for everybody. So Adam, over to you.
Great, thanks Pete. So as Pete said, I'm Adam Wyman. I'm a partner at Travers Smith, specialising in employment law, particularly for tech businesses, from startups through to large global businesses. One thing that I've been doing a lot of over the last few weeks is speaking about furlough with clients, unsurprisingly. I'm going to start off by talking about that a bit, and dealing with furlough and how you might look to exit the furlough situation, and then also move on to talking about how you can set up for the future, both in terms of sort of documents and processes and also your organisational structure. So just to start, in terms of the dealing with the past, most people have now sorted furlough arrangements and calculations. But what else should you be thinking about? Well, the most important thing to get right now is your documentation. There's a good chance that HMRC will look to audit businesses in the future, and they're looking for companies that have got the furlough process wrong, because this is going to cost the taxpayer an awful lot of money. And employees may litigate as well if they claim that you reduce their pay on furlough without doing it in the right way. So make sure that you retain the letters furloughing people. Those are vital, and you need those to demonstrate that you validly change people's employment contracts to allow for furlough. I'd also suggest keeping a file note in place to support the decisions you made. That HMRC audit might come 2-3 years down the line. You might not remember any of this by then. So why did you furlough particular groups of people? What decisions did you make about how you calculated their pay when you made the application? Were there any things that you weren't quite sure about where you had to take a view, like how to deal with commission or holiday pay or maternity pay or something like that? So that's probably the first sort of thing to think about in terms of sort of dealing with that furlough now. And the other thing, obviously, is the furlough scheme's now been extended to the 30th of June. I suspect that your letters putting people on furlough said 31st of May. So have you extended yet? Do your letters allow you to sort of unilaterally extend it, or do you need to get people's agreement to extend to the 30th of June? But I'd encourage you to get that sorted sooner rather than later as well, and get your house in order on that. Another issue that some clients are now sort of starting to think about is accrued holiday pay liability. The government's been clear now, finally, that people continue to accrue holiday whilst on furlough. They've also said that people can take holiday whilst on furlough. If someone takes holiday whilst on furlough, and that includes bank holidays, you have to pay at 100% of pay rather than the reduced furlough amount. So there's a cost involved in people taking holiday, but it obviously reduces your accrued holiday pay liability with part funding from the government. So that's something that lots of businesses are thinking about at the moment. And just a reminder that if you are instructing people to take holiday, you have to give them twice the amount of notice as the amount of holiday. So you have to think about that in terms of the length of notice to give them. But I think aside from those points, I think more businesses are now thinking about getting people back to work. That's really people's focus now.
Adam, how do you think you do that? I mean, will everyone come back at once?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something that lots of people are grappling with at the moment, Pete. I mean, I suppose, what do your letters say around your ability to end furlough is probably the first question. Do you have to give people notice to bring them back? That's one thing to think about just in terms of raw process. But, as you say, will everyone come back at once? Will you need everyone immediately? Quite possibly not. That's what lots of our clients are looking at, is the idea that, you'll bring back people gradually. And then how do you do that? Will you cycle people on and off? Will there be some people that you think that we need them sooner rather than later? And how will you choose between people? There's obviously a risk of allegations of difference in treatment. Lots of businesses, when they were looking at who they furloughed, were giving preference to people who for health reasons needed to be at home, people who had caring responsibilities. That makes complete sense, but there's obviously a risk that someone then claims discrimination if you single them out, and the same will apply on the way out. So it's trying to sort of deal with these things in the right way and deal with them sensitively to try to avoid falling out with people, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's the potential for part-time furlough. That's not allowed at the moment, but we know the government is considering that. There's been a lot of that in the press, that the government's looking at ways to sort of exit the furlough in a gradual way. I think expect an announcement on that soon, but we might well see some form of part-time furlough. Whether that will apply to all businesses or not remains to be seen, but the government's thinking about that. And also you have to think about training requirements. Some people will have been out the office for 3 months. Will you need to refresh them on anything? Employees can attend training whilst on furlough. I think if someone was running the training, they probably can't be on furlough, but someone can attend training whilst on furlough. They must get at least the minimum wage, but otherwise you're allowed to let them do training whilst on furlough. And then the obvious other element to getting people back is the health and safety aspects, things like social distancing. Lots of businesses are spending a lot of time thinking about that at the moment. How will you get people into the office or the production line or whatever that is? How will you ensure social distancing? What do you need to change in terms of your setup to allow that? There's probably a whole nother webinar in itself around how you might do that.
Well, what if people don't want to come back into the office?
Yeah, that's that's going to be a big issue, I think. On the sort of the government guidance, we're promised government guidance this weekend that's going to cover some of these points. So I think hopefully after this weekend we might have a clearer view on how the government feels you ought to deal with questions like that. If anyone wants to go on our distribution list for updates, drop me an email and you'll get our alert as soon as the guidance is published. But I think as a starting point, and unless the government sort of publishes anything to change this, then if people don't want to come back because they're shielding or because they're living with someone who is shielding, technically they're now on statutory sick pay, so you have to treat them as sick. Okay. So if you have enhanced company sick pay, you have to check your policy wording to see whether or not they might be entitled to that as well. But as a starting point, someone who's shielding is on sick pay, so you can't do anything about that. I guess there might be requests from other people as well. That seems quite likely. Lots of businesses felt that roles couldn't be done remotely, and now obviously they have been done remotely for a number of weeks. So you might see flexible working applications for people who are asking to work from home long term. And you'll obviously have to deal with those in accordance with the usual process if they're an application for a sort of permanent working from home. But you might get short-term requests as well, either for home working or for people that just don't feel that they can come in right now. As with most things in employment law, act reasonably, consider how practicable it would be for them to work remotely until the current crisis passes. And if they can't work from home, you may be looking at unpaid leave. Ideally, you'd sort of enter into some sort of agreement with them and sort of try and have a discussion and agree something that works for you and for them.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So that was all I was going to cover on the dealing with the past, and I suppose then just move on quickly to setting up for the future. So there are various changes in employment law which is worth thinking about. Employment contract changes came in on the 6th of April. There are various additional requirements to what needs to be included in an employment contract. That's things like days of the week worked, paid leave, benefits, and all workers, not just employees, get contracts, and they're entitled to a contract from day one now.
I mean, beyond those contract changes, are there anything else that employers should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that you might want to think about is trying to sort of future-proof this happening again. It's possible to have clauses in your contract allowing for layoff and short-time working, right to make changes to the contract, those sorts of clauses. Lots of people didn't have those in and then had to do all the furlough stuff by agreement. You could look to change contracts to introduce clauses to allow for furlough and so on in the future, because there's a risk, I suppose, that we might then have to go back into some sort of lockdown in the future, and you want to be set up to deal with that.
Is that just for new employees, or should we be looking at that for existing employees as well?
Yeah, so the 6th of April changes are just for new hires. You don't have to change existing contracts for existing employees, but you might want to make the other changes I mentioned for existing employees. Now, if you're making those changes, it's easiest to do it by agreement. So looking to agree those changes by employees. If you're doing it as an enforced change, you might have to do consultation, which becomes more cumbersome, more likely to lead to a dispute. So trying to do that by agreement is the best approach.
Is there anything else that you recommend people thinking about getting ready for the future?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously IR35 was a hot topic at the start of the year. The changes to IR35 have been postponed until April 2021. In a nutshell, IR35 says that if a limited company contractor would be an employee but for the limited company, then they should pay income tax. Lots of limited companies aren't taking a legally compliant approach, so HMRC is shifting that tax compliance decision onto the end user. So the end user business will have to make the tax assessment and potentially put contractors on their payroll. So it's important to get your consultancy agreements right now, work out how you'll make status determinations. You've got a bit of time, but now's the time to be thinking about how you'll do that. So when April 2021 comes around, you've got the right things in place. The other thing is immigration. So from 2021, assuming that Brexit goes ahead, which the government's saying it will, anyone coming from the EU will need a visa, just like anyone coming from outside the EU does now. You'll need a license to sponsor those people, which is very similar to the existing Tier 2 license if anyone's got one of those. If you don't have one and you think you will need to hire EU workers in the future, it can take a few months to get that license set up. And there's going to be a big rush of people applying for those licenses at the end of the year. So if you get on with your application now, get your application in. We're talking to lots of clients who are starting to do that now so that they're sort of future-proof and ready to deal with that.
Right, okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah, so just on to the final slide and just to finish up, I mean, beyond the sort of processes and so on in terms of setting up for the future. You know, we don't know what the future will hold, but we are already seeing lots of companies start to plan beyond the stuff about getting people back to work. And, you know, sadly, some don't expect to be back to business as normal for some time, and they're thinking about what that means and looking at other cost-cutting measures.
So if businesses want to retain people, how do they do that when the furlough scheme ends?
Well, I think when the furlough scheme ends, if you don't have work for people to do, you know, you probably don't want to make them redundant if you think that you might need them again in the future. There's a cost in making people redundant. It's not very appealing to go down that route. So there's potential for agreeing unpaid leave with people, or agreeing reduced hours and pay, and lots of that was happening before the furlough scheme announced. And I've got lots of clients who are expecting to look to agree that, because they don't expect it will be back to business as usual, and either sort of agreeing someone will do, you know, 50% of work for 50% of pay, or that they'll take a few months unpaid leave and you'll give them something else, you know, in the future. So looking at stuff like that.
What if they don't have the right people?
That's when you're into redundancy.
Right.
If you don't need the existing roles, and you can be into redundancy if you need different roles. So if you look at it and think, we don't need these people, what we need is sort of that type of role instead going forwards, because the world's going to be a bit different. Well, that can be a redundancy situation as well. So you can be letting people go because they are doing a role that's not needed, even if you still need to hire in other areas.
Okay.
If you've got fewer than 20 redundancies, you're looking at individual consultation. That takes a week or two. It's not too bad. It's a sort of few individual meetings. Hopefully, most people won't be looking at collective consultation. That's 20 or more people, but then you're into mandatory collective consultation over 30 days or 45 days if it's 100 or more with employee representatives, and that's a lot more cumbersome in terms of process.
Yeah. So is it possible then to make redundancy because your business need is changing, rather than you need fewer people?
Yeah, exactly. So you can make redundancies and then hire into distinct roles. So even if overall you need more people, you can still make redundancies. You have to look at whether or not you could sort of easily retrain the people you're letting go, and sort of consider whether or not they could be retained. But as a starting point, it's possible to look at it because you need to change your business structure. It's a sort of strategic decision rather than about cost saving.
Right. Okay.
Just conscious of time here, because we've got about 40 minutes left and we want to kind of keep it to an hour.
Yeah, I think that's the end of it now.
More to cover, or whether we want to move on to questions.
Yeah, that was literally all we had to say. So very happy to move on to questions now.
Excellent. Well, we can see in the chat that Karen has been quite active. I don't know who would be the best person to address the three questions that she's posed there. Can you all see that? Pete or Gary?
Hold on. I need to open.
You go to the bottom of your screen and you click on the chat function. You should.
Tim, if I quickly pick up the first one, and I'm sure Adam can pick up the other two very quickly.
Sure.
Karen, in answer to that question, absolutely, candidates' expectations will change. We get the sense actually they'd already started to change. I think remote working is and has been a question that's been asked for some time. It's interesting that most candidates are now asking whether there's a flexibility in terms of working. Most organisations kind of request people to be there on a Monday, but actually look for some flexibility maybe on a Friday. Actually, no longer is kind of people hiring from the local area the immediate need. So actually, there has to be some form of flexibility. We as recruiters are almost stuck sometimes with asking our clients, actually, what's your remote working policy? And you get somewhat of an ambiguous answer. I think we typically kind of suggest that most companies suggest they'll do remote working, but it's actually not written into the contract, or it's actually not written into the standard process of that organization. I would encourage everybody to really consider what their remote working policy actually is, because actually being able to present to candidates actually a remote working policy and actually a remote working capability is incredibly attractive. I suspect that most people have seen productivity either go up or actually remain pretty consistent with people working from home. That would suggest that remote working does actually work. So interesting times going forward. So yes, candidate expectations will almost expect you to have a remote working policy. And I think we would encourage companies not to actually say it's something that we do, actually work out what it is and actually use that as an attraction tool for your organization, because it's a real plus point and you're ahead of the game with other organizations that stay pretty ambiguous on that point.
Right.
Yeah, and to go to your other questions, Karen, all of the changes in the contract, yeah, you can signpost changes that then reference an underlying policy. And in many situations, that's a very sensible approach to take, because you want to have the right to change your benefits, for example, change your, family pay arrangements or something like that. So, yeah, definitely, I would advocate, some simple clauses in the contract that then refer to underlying policies which you have the right to change. In terms of going into consultation on redundancies during furlough, the government has not been explicit on this point. Now, I have got a number of clients who are actively looking at collective redundancy processes, and realistically, they need to, for business reasons, run those during the furlough period, because what they don't want to do, if you're into 30 or even 45-day collective consultation, what you don't want to do is have to bring people back on full pay, often with nothing to do, whilst you then consult with them about redundancy. And it's a bit of a sham, and it's not really fair on anyone. Now, the government's not expressly said that you can do that. They haven't expressly said whether you can be an employee representative whilst on furlough. However, it was one of the reasons that the furlough scheme got extended when it did was because of pressure from the CBI, who were pointing out to the government that they were at the point where people would have to start redundancy consultation, and were saying, if you don't be clear with people about the month's extension now, you're going to get a load of redundancy consultation processes starting, and we know that because one of our team is supporting the CBI at the moment on that. So it's as a result, I think that it's implicit in all of this that you can start consultation, although no one's expressly said that you can.
There's been another question coming in from Lindsay Watson, which I guess, Adam, is more your bag. I don't know whether you're in a position to comment or not.
Yeah, sure. So employee asked to have the bank holidays whilst he was furloughed back. He was paid and didn't have to work. If under his contract, he normally takes bank holidays off, then that position continues during furlough unless you've expressly changed it. But as I said earlier, you'd have to pay him at 100%, not at the furlough rate. But he's not entitled to it back. Equally, you could ask, you could look to agree with people that they won't take bank holidays, and therefore you won't have to pay them at 100%, but you obviously then have additional days accrued. And then Karen, just asked position on workforce or trade union reps, can they work on their union activities during furlough? Again, similar position. So what the government said under its guidance is that you can't do work that's of a sort of financial benefit for your employer. And then they've expressly said that company directors can still do statutory director duty work whilst on furlough. And then they've not really said anything else. Now, it seems to be the case to me that if you've got someone who's a rep for redundancy or something like that, that they should be able to do that work. How far does that go, though? Does it allow managers to check in with their team members? Does it allow workforce reps to check in, or do union activities, those sorts of things? I think you get into a grey area there. I think there's a risk that you do potentially affect the validity of the furlough. What I'd say is that as an employer, I certainly wouldn't be encouraging people to do stuff like that, and I would be sort of at best silent on whether they can do it. If people choose in their own time to then go ahead and do certain activities, that'd be fine. But as an employer, I wouldn't be doing that unless it's for something specific, like a consultation process.
Great. Just one more question, which is around organisational culture and do you think organisational culture, how important do you think organisational culture is to a successful hire, and how honest do you think an organisation should be around? So this is really important. So every organisation has a culture. I think the honesty comes from you recognising your culture and hiring the right people into that culture, as opposed to presenting a culture that you think is attractive, because that's where the whole relationship breaks down, which is why the psychometrics is really important, because you just can't hide away from it. And being able to assess your company's culture internally, and utilizing that measurement to then hire the right people into your culture. There's obviously a case for hiring people to help change your culture, but that's a longer term burn, and that's where maybe the honesty needs to come in, is that you need to recognize the culture needs to change, and you bring in game changers or innovators, as I said earlier. But I think the honesty comes from within, as opposed to having to say to the candidate, we have X culture or our culture is bad. In our opinion, there's no such thing as a bad culture. It's hiring the wrong people into that culture, or to do the wrong jobs, or to change that culture in a positive manner. If an organisation is facing major challenges, how off-putting do you think that would be to new hires? Again, it's about being honest about that and saying that, we are facing challenges and this is what needs to be, because those people that you hire, you have to recognize is they'll come in to help you change that, but they're not necessarily going to be with you forever, because they've been brought in to make those changes. So you should absolutely hire people for maybe on a contract basis to do that, to come in, help shape, change and transform, but you have to recognize those people won't stay with you forever. And then as you then reach that new business as usual, you would then need to recruit the new culture version of that. So hopefully that makes sense.
I mean, if I may add to that,
Yeah.
I would suggest that, with something like that, there's no point in lying, because if you present a false representation of what people are walking into, you're just opening yourself up for problems along the way. I guess. Pete,
yeah.
You would.
No, that's absolutely right, and that's why it's about being, because it's very hard, because if someone says, what's it like to work here, you're not going to say it's rubbish, are you? You're going to say it's okay, and depending on who's doing the interview, if it's the owner of the business, they're going to say it's great, because why wouldn't they? But if you've got a manager, they'll say we've got challenges, or it's very political, or whatever the issue may be. And that can come across as being negative. But as I say, it's more about understanding who you are, so that, and the job that's needed to be. Because some roles require people to be challenging. So there are some roles in an organisation that need people to challenge and go in and challenge different departments or functions, because they need sorting out, or because it's a relationship type role, and improvements need to be made. So it's about understanding what's needed, and similarly, if you have a relationship type role, salesperson, whatever, that doesn't necessarily require such a heavy fist, then you need to recruit the right people for that as well. So, and this is where psychometrics come in, because any salesperson, for example, just as for the purpose of this conversation, will say that they're motivated, they're driven, they're money orientated, but you can actually assess these things and absolutely, look underneath those traits to see they're absolutely not those things.
I think it's probably worth noting, Pete, that there's a misplaced perception that fast-paced, dynamic, innovative are kind of catch-all words that explain your business. We can't always be, and we can't all be fast-paced, dynamic, innovative, because actually the truth is you're not, and we're not. Actually, it's a matter of fact finding the right descriptive words, actually measure your culture and actually explain what your culture is. By the same time, we actually speak with candidates quite often, and they explain that they're fast-paced and dynamic and innovative, and you meet them and you think, well, actually you're anything but. that's not to suggest you're a bad candidate, but actually let's find the right hole for you as an organization, because actually if you put those two things together, you actually get incredibly successful placements and people. The interesting thing is when someone presents themselves as that fast-paced, dynamic and innovative, and you send them one of those types of candidates, we can pretty much guarantee that that's going to be an unhappy marriage. So actually that honesty and us helping you be an honest broker in that sense, it doesn't make you a better business, as actually if you use those words. What it tends to do is actually unsettles the people within your business, because actually you're everything that those words are describing. So there's a whole set of descriptives, and particularly in psychology, that actually measure your culture. I think if you're really keen to understand what your culture is, actually bringing people into that culture that actually fit that culture, it's incredibly how powerful and successful that marriage can be. Yeah. There are things that I think organizations have got to be much more aware of and actually start to think about, because actually if you get the right people, the power of few can be quite impressive.
Yeah, and just to top that off, I'm conscious of time, but if culture is if we're looking at a skills gap, and the skills gap will remain even if there are lots of people out there, but the skills gap can help you bring that gap down, because you can hire culture as over technical. Technical can be taught. Culture is almost embedded into an individual from sort of early 20s. So the culture, if you find the right person into the right culture, you can the rest of the technical can be taught, or the job can be taught over time. And if you put someone into the right culture, they tend to be higher achievers. They tend to be more productive individuals, and they tend to stay with you for longer, and that's where you get your return on your investment. Yes, you might have to train a little bit, but the longevity of that individual in your organization should far outweigh any cost that it's taken you to acquire or train that person as well. So we've reached the hour slot. Just before you leave, everybody, and thank you very much for your time. We're happy to take questions or discussions afterwards. Our details are in the webinar, which we'll share out with everybody. But just for people on this call, we just wanted to offer some free advice and guidance. So the first offer is our marketing team. I mentioned earlier about your employer branding and your online presence. Our marketing team are offering a free employer branding content audit, where they'll spend 20 minutes with you to understand your brand, your culture, and the type of person or people that you look to hire. That could be now or in the future. They'll review your key web pages, your blogs, any LinkedIn activity, and they'll provide you with a 30-minute video presentation of their findings, in which they'll provide you with quick, actionable steps to help you improve your content and attract better applicants. Okay. We're also offering a free standard advertising package. Now, normally if you were to go out and buy all of this independently, minimum £500, but we're passing on that saving to anyone that's interested, where we post it across 28 different job boards for you. We'll provide you with full analytics of where all of your applications are coming from, for future advertising, so we can tell you exactly where, if you are going to advertise again, where to advertise that in the future to get the better return on your investment. That'll also be branded with your logos. If for those of you that require a bit more of a more of a high touch service, there is a half price full advertising package where we go across LinkedIn. We also add pay-per-click advertising for that, again with full analytics of where your money has been spent, and a branded ad. They're all branded as well, and we're doing that for half price. There's normally £1,000, but we're doing that for £500. And again, if for those of you just don't want the hassle of having to manage any adverts and applications that come through, we're offering an improved campaign management offer. Our standard fee is 20%, which includes all of the advertising. But if you have spent any advertising prior to using this service, we'll refund any of the costs that you've spent off the total fee, and we'll reduce our standard fee down to 15%. As part of that service, we'll give you free personalised psychometrics for your candidates. So we'll help you identify the right person for your business. And we're also extending out payment terms to 45 days. And we invoice you after the candidate starts. So we're trying to obviously delay any costs that you might incur, for recruitment for as long as possible. So that's it. That concludes our webinar. I hope you found it interesting. And please feel free to reach out to us afterwards if you've got any questions or concerns. Even if you just want to talk something through, we're happy to provide some advice. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Pete. So, I mean, in order to facilitate that, we'll share Pete's details with everybody on the call, so you can always follow up with them afterwards, and potentially with some of the offers as well. So you've got all of that. We'll also make the recording of this webinar available, and we'll share the slides as well, so you get all of that in an email hopefully later on today. And I just wanted to sort of wrap up by obviously thanking Pete, Gary, and Adam, and the team there. I thought it was very informative. And obviously be on the lookout for the other webinars that we're organizing. So as I said earlier, on the website, we've got the next 5 sort of all lined up, and they're there, and you can register as well. So please have a look at what they are, and if you're interested, and obviously join. But again, thank you very much to Identifi Global. I hope you find it of interest, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. So thank you all very much for participating.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.